Okay, so today we are diving into some pretty murky waters.
Okay.
You've probably heard about Project 2025, right?
Yeah.
All the controversy surrounding it. This blueprint for a potential second Trump term.
Right.
Well, get this, even some of the people who helped create it are starting to get nervous.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. We're seeing this very public break from the former project leader Paul Dans,
Right.
and he's openly criticizing the direction it's all heading in,
Yeah.
particularly what he calls the violent rhetoric being used by some on the right.
Yeah, that's what really caught my eye too.
Yeah.
It's not just some random pundit.
Hmm.
This is someone who helped shape these policies. We're talking about someone who was literally in the room.
Right.
So when someone like that starts expressing doubts, it really makes you stop and think.
It does. It absolutely does. And Dan's criticism is primarily directed at Kevin Roberts,
Okay.
the current head of the Heritage
And
Foundation.
and the Heritage Foundation is the organization behind Project 2025,
That's
right?
right.
And just for everyone listening, the Heritage Foundation is a pretty influential conservative think tank.
Extremely. They carry a lot of weight in Republican circles, for sure.
Okay.
So when Roberts makes a statement, people listen.
Yeah.
And one comment in particular has drawn a lot of attention. It was on a podcast a few months back.
Right.
He was talking about the potential for a second American Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
adding that it would remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Okay. I don't know about you, but that kind of language makes me a little uneasy.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's a thinly veiled threat there.
Right. Well, the Heritage Foundation insists that that comment was taken out of context.
Okay.
And that he was actually referring to the potential for violence coming from the left.
Hmm.
But even when you look at the language used in Roberts' upcoming book about Project 2025,
Yeah.
let's just say it doesn't exactly paint a picture of peaceful political discourse.
Okay, so what kind of language are we talking about here?
Well, an early draft reportedly called for a political revolution to overthrow today's incarnation of the ruling class.
Right.
There's even a line in there that the U.S. must be destroyed and replaced.
Wow, and this is from a book promoting Project 2025.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that going over well with moderate voters.
You don't think so? It's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems that's what somebody said, because it's worth noting that after the attempt on Trump's life, some of the more inflammatory language was reportedly toned down in the book.
Hmm.
But it still gives you a sense of the kind of rhetoric that was circulating within these circles even before Dan's departure.
Yeah, it definitely adds a whole other layer to Dan's criticisms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He claims he left because of disagreements with Roberts over the direction of the project,
Right.
which makes me wonder if those disagreements went beyond just policy differences. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dan's has been pretty tight-lipped about the specifics of his departure. The Heritage Foundation, for their part, has countered by suggesting that Dan's criticism is nothing more than sour grapes, motivated by a personal grudge.
Right.
But like you said, when you consider the language Roberts has used, it makes you wonder if there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there are two very different visions for the future of the Republican Party clashing here.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have Roberts and his push for a more aggressive, some might even say revolutionary approach.
Right.
And then you have Dan's, who seems to be advocating for a more measured, perhaps more traditional conservative stance.
That's a really good point. I think that gets to the heart of the dilemma facing the Republican Party right now.
Yeah.
They're trying to appeal to a base that's increasingly drawn to this very strong, very assertive rhetoric,
Right.
while also trying to avoid alienating more moderate voters. It's a tough needle to thread.
Yeah. Especially with the election right around the corner.
Oh, tell me about it.
And speaking of which, how is Project 2025 playing out in the presidential race? I know Trump himself has tried to distance himself from it,
Yeah.
but you can't deny the parallels between his policies and those endorsed in the project.
You're absolutely right. The
Yeah.
connection is undeniable.
Yeah.
And while Trump claims he's never even read Project 2025
Right.
and doesn't know who's behind it,
Uh-huh.
there are over 140 people involved in the project who also worked in his previous administration.
Wait, 140? That's a pretty significant overlap. It makes you wonder about those claims that he's in the dark.
It does. It really does. And the Democrats have certainly picked up on this.
Yeah.
They're using Project 2025 to paint a very specific and some might say alarming picture of what a potential second Trump term might look like.
Right.
They're essentially saying, if you're concerned about Trump's policies before, just take a look at what this project advocates for.
It's a smart strategy, politically speaking. Whether you agree with their stance or not, They're effectively using Project 2025 to define what a vote for Trump means in their view. So with all this in mind, how much weight do you think Danz's criticisms really carry?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Will this resonate with Republican voters? It's hard to say for sure. I mean, it's entirely possible this whole thing will be brushed aside.
Right.
And that the momentum behind Project 2025 will only intensify.
Yeah.
After all, there's a significant portion of the Republican base that seems to be energized by this more confrontational approach.
Yeah, especially after the attempt on Trump's life.
Yeah.
You have to imagine that some people are feeling even more entrenched in their beliefs.
Yeah.
More willing to condone extreme rhetoric if they feel like their way of life is under attack.
Absolutely. You're hitting on a crucial point here. This isn't just about policy disagreements.
Right.
It's about fundamentally different visions of America,
Yeah.
of what it means to be a conservative in the 21st century.
Hmm.
Dan's criticisms, whether they gain traction or not, have exposed a very real rift within the Republican Party.
So where does that leave us? What should we be paying attention to as we head into the final stretch of the election?
Well, I think it's important to look beyond the headlines and the sound bites, you know?
Yeah.
Watch how the Republican Party navigates these internal tensions.
Okay.
How do they balance the more aggressive rhetoric coming from figures like Roberts
Right.
with the need to appeal to a broader electorate?
And what about Danz himself? Do you think he'll become a vocal critic of the project and Trump in general? Or will he just fade into the background?
It's hard to say. He's been relatively quiet since his departure from the Heritage Foundation.
Right.
But his decision to speak out at all, to risk alienating former colleagues
Yeah.
and potentially jeopardizing his own standing within the conservative movement,
Right.
suggests that he believes there's something bigger at stake here.
Yeah. It's definitely a story worth following.
Mm-hmm.
So as we watch this election unfold, what should we be looking out for?
Well, I think it's crucial to look beyond just the surface level stuff, you know, look beyond the headlines and the sound bites and really pay attention to how the Republican Party handles these internal tensions.
Right.
How do they balance this more aggressive rhetoric that we're seeing from people like Roberts
Yeah.
with the need to appeal to a broader electorate? Because that's a tough thing to pull off.
It is. It really is. So for everyone listening out there, as we head into the final stretch of this election, think about this. What is this whole internal division with Danz speaking out? What does that tell us about the future of the Republican Party? What does it say about the choices facing conservatives? And really, what does it say about the choices facing all Americans in these kind of crazy times?
That's a good question. Something to think about for sure.
It is. It's a lot to unpack, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Thanks for diving into this with me today.
Yeah, this was a good one.
Really appreciate your insights as always.
Anytime. Glad to be here.